Stephen C. Smith, welcome back. We are here celebrating the publication of your book, Hitchcock and Herman, The Friendship and Film Scores That Changed Cinema. And as we just showed Psycho and agreed that it is probably the most influential film score of all time. Now we're going to show a movie from the mid-50s that to me is like one of the, I'm not going to say forgotten Hitchcock film, but an overlooked Hitchcock film. The Man Who Knew Too Much, with Jimmy Stewart and Doris Day, which I think is a terrific movie. But why do you think it isn't as well known as the other films?
Well, it's interesting. This film is a remake of a movie that Hitchcock had made in Britain in 1934, and Hitchcock, I think, unfairly dismissed that movie as the work of a talented amateur. So when he had this fantastic contract at Paramount and could do everything just the way he wanted, with a big budget, with the stars, with a hit song, he always had wanted a hit song, and boy, did he get it with this movie.
Yes, indeed.
He was really able to plus everything, and helping him do that to a great extent, I think, was his new composer and new friend, Bernard Herrmann. And I think it's a sign of just how quickly they connected as people. The fact that Benny, as he was known, and Benny and Hitch, Benny had just scored his first film for Hitchcock, The Trouble with Harry, and weeks later, Hitchcock had decided not only to have Benny score his next film, The Man Who Knew Too Much, he cast him in the film as himself, Bernard Herrmann, as the conductor of the climax of the film, the all-important sequence in the Albert Concert Hall. It's interesting, he and Hitchcock decided to not have Benny write a new piece of music for the Albert Hall sequence. Herrmann could have stamped his foot down and probably gotten his way to write it. No, they used the music from the first version of the film because, as Benny said, it couldn't be improved. So what Herrmann does in the rest of the film around that sequence is he writes this fantastic, very dramatic main title sequence that sounds like the Storm Clouds Cantata, but is very much Bernard Herrmann. And then he sort of lies in wait for as much as possible throughout the film. There are some terrific Herrmann suspense cues, but they are short, they're quiet usually, they're written for a small ensemble, and he knew that if the music was sparse, that when it came in for the Albert Hall sequence, it would be a knockout.
Do you think, because of how quickly they formed this friendship, that it had a bearing on Hitchcock's decision to make this film? Because music plays an important part in this film, not just the Albert Hall sequence, but because Doris Day is in the film. And one of Hitchcock's most unique suspense sequences is based around Doris Day singing what would become the, famous song, Que Sera, Sera.
Que sera, sera.
Is there some validity to that?
Well, I wish I could say that Bernard Herrmann was one of the reasons that Hitchcock chose to make this film when he did. It was already in the works, but I think that it really gave Hitchcock enormous confidence that the Albert Hall sequence was going to be great. And one thing I discovered in writing this book was that Hitchcock, after filming the sequence, and of course they record the music first, it's all done to a big, they call it playback, Hitchcock wanted to make the sequence longer. So he and Herrmann worked very carefully actually repeating little phrases of the music, and you wouldn't even notice it. They've done it so brilliantly. So Herrmann became sort of a co-creator of the sequence in post, along with Hitchcock's brilliant editor, George Tomasini, who was so key to all of these films. They also, when they went to London to actually film in the Albert Hall, and they had a great time together. They both went with their wives, and after the movie, we can talk a little about their behind-the-scenes friendship, maybe, when the four of them would get together. But this was certainly hard work, but I think you can tell that Hitchcock was really enjoying himself tremendously in the creation of this movie.
Well, Stephen, I think a lot more people have seen Psycho and maybe Vertigo and North by Northwest that have seen this film. But I love this movie. I think it's fantastic, not just because Doris Day is in it. So here we go. Alfred Hitchcock's second crack at this movie. Here is The Man Who Knew Too Much. Okay, I am back with Stephen C. Smith, the author of Hitchcock and Herman, The Friendship and Film Scores That Changed Cinema. We just watched The Man Who Knew Too Much, and you have alluded several times tonight to the fact that this was more than just a professional collaboration. There was a genuine friendship between these men.
Exactly. Right away, Hitchcock recognized a kindred spirit in Herman. I mean, yes, they'd met a few times socially, but working together, they became really good friends, which is why I put the word friendship first in the title. And there are wonderful stories that Hitch and his wife Alma would have Benny and his wife Lucy Anderson come over to Hitch's home in Bel Air, and Alma would cook these wonderful meals, and as was always the tradition, no matter who was the guest, supposedly, Hitch and Benny would wash the dishes after the meal as their tribute to Alma. So I love this image. I don't know if they put on aprons, but I love the image of Alfred Hitchcock and Bernard Herrmann, washing dishes, talking, sharing stories. And apparently once they got to talking about what they would have done if they hadn't pursued their respective careers. And, I'm sure Benny probably said, Hitch, what would you have done if you hadn't been a director? And Benny said, Herman was a huge Anglophile. He spent his last years in Britain. And he said, if I hadn't been a composer, I would have loved to run a pub. I would love a great English pub. I'd even like fog outside of it. What would you have done? And supposedly Hitch took a napkin and put it on his head and said, a hanging judge. So whether that's true or not, I think it captures the spirit of this wonderfully intimate relationship. I saw one note to Benny and Lucy signed Love Hitch, just a few months into their collaboration. So I've written about Bernard Herrmann for 40 years. When I was in college, I started writing a biography of him that was published some years ago. But I realized there was so much more to this particular story of these two men. And I think that there's really no relationship in the history of movies where a director and composer had such a dramatic turn that their own story could have been a movie.
Interesting. I mean, we're steadily moving towards the bad part
The breakup,
of this
yes.
story, the breakup. But I wanted to ask, why do you think that The Man Who Knew Too Much is not as well known as the other Hitchcock? Just because the other ones are so great,
Yeah.
they just naturally overshadow it, or what's the deal?
Well, it's interesting. At the time, this was one of Hitchcock's best-known movies. As to why it's not as well-known today, perhaps it's not as dark a film as the other ones. It's a little more optimistic. But I think it's a very personal film for both men because it's about music, and I think Hitchcock really had a great love of family. And I think one of his deepest fears was something happening to his family. It's a great example of Hitchcock making something that was both personal and meaningful to him and also a huge commercial success.
Well, I was hoping you weren't going to say it's because of Doris Day, right? Because she doesn't really fit the mold of the Hitchcock Ice Queen. She's not Grace Kelly or Eva Marie Saint.
She looks
or
great
even
in those
Janet
Edith
Leigh.
Head clothes, though.
She certainly does.
And her acting in the Albert Hall sequence, I mean, I think that's one reason that Hitchcock extended the Albert Hall sequence after it had been shot, after the music had been recorded. I can't prove this, but I bet he looked at those incredible shots of Doris Day emoting, which I have to say, I think were filmed at Paramount and brilliantly incorporated. But he saw those shots and he was opening up the sequence more and more. So I think she's terrific in the movie.
Yeah, she's absolutely great, as she always is.
Yes.
But my understanding is that she didn't understand that she was giving Hitchcock what he wanted.
That's right. For a lot of the movie, Hitchcock didn't say really anything to her after a take, and that began to worry her. And finally, she said to him, Mr. Hitchcock, what am I doing wrong? You don't say anything about my performance. And he said, it's because I like you so much. You're doing everything perfectly. And she said, oh, thank God. I mean, I've been so afraid of you. I mean, you're never afraid. And then he said, I'm always afraid. And then he opened up and was surprisingly, I would like to think, truthfully vulnerable and told her many of the things that he was afraid of in life, which included apparently walking across the commissary at Paramount because someone he didn't know or someone he didn't want to see might go up and talk to him. This was a man who contained his fears, and luckily for us, he knew where to put them.
Yeah, he put them all up on the screen. And we have some more of those phobias and fears and
Yes, we
strange
do.
perversions ahead. Yes, we do. So come back, because right after the break, I will be back with Stephen C. Smith, and we're going to see what many people consider Alfred Hitchcock's masterpiece, Vertigo.
Next on TCM, Vertigo, then North by Northwest, and later, The Immortal Story. TCM spins you a yarn tonight.